Hey, how's it going? It's Alex here from Tanner Studio. I hope you're well. Today I want to talk about something which is, I think, quite an interesting topic for myself and perhaps yourself as well. If you're kind of a multidisciplinary artist, if you're interested in many different things, but you're not too sure which way to go. Let me just first off start by saying that things change, throughout life. Obviously, we're constantly kind of evolving and, changing, and our identity shifts. So what I'll say in this video, I don't know, maybe this won't stand the test of time. Maybe 5 years, 10 years, I'll feel a bit different. But I kind of just wanted to say that because sometimes to kind of speak with something almost with a little bit of kind of authority and conviction, and then only for 5, 10 years later to look back at it and think, oh man, I was completely wrong. I mean, that's potentially quite embarrassing. So I just want to say, obviously, we change and we shift, and maybe my view on this will shift, but I don't know. We'll see. So firstly, I just want to give a bit of context about, my background and whatnot, just so maybe this is something you could relate to and, see how it plays out in your own life. I got into kind of music production when I was about 14, and around that time as well, I got into DJing. I was very inspired by my brother, who was like playing hip hop vinyls and whatnot. I thought, I love, hearing these tracks. I want to make these tracks. So I got into Fruity Loops, and then from there, basically, it kind of, went into kind of Reason and Logic, and this was like, we're talking about 20 plus years ago, 23 years ago maybe. And I was very, very invested in music production for a very long time, and also DJing as well. I kind of got into turntablism. I played hundreds of nights, and I even DJ'd in a strip club for a year. It was fun. Come on, I was in my mid-20s, it was quite a funny thing. And I also had records out, I had vinyls pressed, something like things that people don't really kind of go for. I thought these were quite unique experiences. And I did pirate radio as well. I used to DJ on pirate radio. And then I kind of worked at this a couple of these artist development studios. I did that for quite a few years, and I met all sorts, and I got a bit of kind of a look into kind of the behind the scenes of the industry, or at least people who are trying to get into the industry. And I worked with hundreds of singers, recording hundreds of singers, and rappers and stuff. And then at that time as well, I was selling beats, and I was kind of working with rappers. And I tried to be an aspiring artist myself as well. I was singing and rapping on tracks, and recording loads of videos. I must have about a dozen music videos out there on the internet. And I really gave a go of it. But my problem was I can never really just focus it kind of on one direction. And I think that's been my issue, and I think probably maybe for you as well. If you're kind of a multidisciplinary person, it's very hard to kind of box yourself. But after that, when I met my wife and got with my wife, I started making music for games, or trying to do that. And I persevered at that for a few years, and eventually I started landing on some games which actually paid, and that was pretty cool. From there, I kind of started working with an animation studio, and as a freelancer, and I composed about 40 tracks for their videos, which were for a third-party client, which are these little 30-second animations, and they were really cool, absolutely amazing. And it's orchestral kind of music. And then I worked for them full-time for a bit. So yeah, I've been doing music for such a long time, but when I started trying to be an artist, I started recording my own music videos as well. And I realized, I actually quite enjoy this. This is quite cool. I really had quite a fascination for the color grading and, the technology, and just kind of shots and compositions. I found this quite fascinating. But to be honest, I kind of started to move away from music videos because sometimes there's a bit of a drama with a lot of the artists you'd work with, and it could be a little bit dramatic, sometimes, there's a lot of crazy characters in that scene. And that's when I kind of decided I wanted to get into more the business side of video production, working with kind of businesses and whatnot. And that's kind of why Tanner Studio came about. All my life as well, I've always had an interest in kind of visual art as well. I did a lot of oil paintings when I was young, and I was quite interested in that. And also, motion graphics. I've started to get kind of okay at motion graphics. And also I started exploring a bit of 3D, And I don't know, all these interests, you just think, man, what direction do I go in? What direction do I go in? One thing I started to realize in my journey is when you have many skills, it can be difficult really just to focus on one thing. And if you find it difficult to, say, for example, get a full-time creative job around that area of specialization, obviously you have to kind of work freelance, and I find that when you're freelance, that's when you kind of have to expand your skills. You know, you have to kind of make yourself more valuable by saying, oh, I can do this as well, I can do this as well. And I think in a way, that's why being a multidisciplinary person is kind of more appropriate for, I suppose, freelancers, right? But I started to think in a way that it's not necessarily like, you know, a curse, you know, having all these different skills, but you have to kind of create an identity which encapsulates all of them. And this is why I want to talk about having a singular vision, because I think as being kind of a composer, music producer, sound person, my identity was heavily fixed in that. Whereas at the same time, I was also doing video, and I kept thinking to myself, like, you know, oh, video, like, I think more people generally need video. Should I do this or should I do music? And there's this constant conflict. And I think with the music thing, it's a very tough industry. Like, you can be like very talented, extremely talented even, and you can still find it very hard to have a sustainable living. And, you know, I see and hear so many stories about guys who are like, you know, 50, 60, and they're still gigging for like 150 quid, despite being tremendously talented. And it's just like, I thought to myself, I don't know if that's the road I want to go down. It's like a gamble almost. It's a bit like, you know, playing the lottery. And I think if you're kind of a musician who has literally, you know, you can't do anything but music, that's like your main passion. And I think in a way you should really go for it, because, well, like, what else are you gonna do for a start? And then, you know, and then obviously you can do things like teach as well, teach music, and you kind of integrate it all within that framework. But I think if you have multidisciplinary interests, I think that's kind of a sign for you to be like, you know what, I've got to do these other things as well, but I've got to find a way to marry them all together. But yeah, I realized making that marriage between all my different skills work is something which I had to do, because with the music world, it's like you can spend so much time just sending out emails and emails and emails to people who just don't respond. And I've seen, you know, like, I've seen people who've kind of succeeded and made it, quote unquote, and they just look disheveled as well. You know, there's certain YouTube people I kind of followed who are kind of doing the music thing full time, but it's like, you know, they don't have children. I have a daughter. You know, I've got to spend time with my daughter. I can't spend like, you know, 14 hours a day creating tracks. I think as well with music, there's the kind of, you know, this incessant need to network. And truth be told, man, when you're at my age, you know, because you're in your late 30s, I'm not out there anymore, you know, networking and going to cool parties. Again, I'm with like my family and, you know, trying to eat better, trying to sleep, you know, more, and trying to exercise. And I'm trying to live a more balanced life. And I just think the whole networking thing is tough as you get older, you know. And I think, you know, that this kind of incessant competition and that incessant desire just to be kind of noticed and be seen, you know, it can just get a bit draining after a while. And I think, especially when I did my therapy and I started to, you know, come to the understanding that I'm good enough as it is. I think that's when, you know, the penny started to drop, and I realized, you know, you don't have to kill yourself trying to prove to the world what a great, you know, producer and composer you are. You know, you can actually start investing your time in things like, you know, videography, a lot more, something which actually people are also more willing to pay for. And we have to be real, you know, in this world, like, passion's amazing, but I think you kind of need to follow the money a little bit as well, you know. And I think it's kind of good in a way, because at the end of the day, you're providing some sort of value to people, you know. And that's not to say music doesn't provide value, but I think it's just quite satisfying knowing you're creating something which, for example, might help another business, you know, get more sales, or you might help a business grow, you know. And I think, especially with videography, it's just fun being able to just like go out there and shoot videos and just navigate the real world a lot more. I think, you know, when you're like a studio rat, you know, like a music producer, you spend just so much time in the studio. It's crazy, man. And I don't want to look back on my life and think, oh, is this all I did in my life? Just sat in the studio? Nah, man, nah, not really. I think your identity is very important in navigating your way through life. And again, as I mentioned a bit earlier, having this kind of deep background in music production and composition put my identity, you know, down a certain road. But when things start to get shaky, and we're talking after a long time, you know, when you start to think like, is this really the road? Plus you're doing something parallel to it, you know, you're doing video production, motion graphics, whatnot. You realize, you know what, maybe I'm meant to be doing more than just music. like for a while, I was just like, I'm just either music or video. And I think the penny really dropped when I finally realized, the singular vision is the way forward. And that's where you will find your success, that because you need to unify your energy, you need to unify everything into one direction ultimately. Because I liken having different identities almost as kind of like following two destinations, on a roadmap. Say if someone said to you like, okay, we need to get to our destination, which is over here, but we also need to get to our destination, which is over here. It's like, what are you meant to do? So say for example, that's my musical identity and that's my more visual videographer identity. Like, how are you gonna get there? You're gonna go here for a bit and then you're gonna drive here for a bit and then are you gonna go here for a bit and then drive there? Or what are you gonna do? And I think with this channel here and, my company, Time the Studio, that was a way to unify my vision and finally say, you know what, I have all these different skills here and it might primarily be videography, but I can do a bit of music as well, but I'll keep it top shelf for now, and only do it when it's needed or do a bit of like sound design when it's needed. And this is another interesting thing, and I have to give a shout out to a YouTuber called John Makes Beats, and he made quite a good video about do dreams always have to be fulfilled? And when I heard that, and also, I heard from my therapist, he said something interesting about how we can't do everything, and that's okay. Life is short, and sometimes you have to accept the truth of that. And my guy, John Makes Beats as well, was saying in his video about how not all dreams are meant to be fulfilled. Sometimes it's nice just to keep it a dream. And it made me realize, like, with music, although I've got a deep love for it, why don't I just make a song every now and then, or make a track every now and then? And I don't have to just kill myself making music all the time now. And I think that's okay, And the fact that I can marry everything under just one name, Time the Studio, I think it's almost a massive relief, And I've kind of got everything I need now. And if someone comes to me, needing everything, then that's amazing. But if they just need a bit of videography, then that's amazing too. And now I can just focus on marketing this and just going down that one direction, that singular vision, just keeping my energy focused and direct. We need to find ways to unify our vision. And that's what it's about. The vision will give you energy, the vision will carry you through. And when a vision is so exciting and it's something which is grand and it's something which is like bigger than yourself, you'll just feel that kind of spark and excitement in yourself. And I felt when I had my kind of focus divided, it's like you can kind of be energized by each of these different identities, but at the same time, it's like it's split. You might spend a bit of time here, and then you just completely neglect that, and vice versa. And in the end, you're kind of just fragmented and you're not really going anywhere fast. So this is why I advocate, the singularity of vision. Thanks for sitting through that. I hope that gives a bit of more context as to where I'm coming from, and hopefully that's something that you can reflect on. And I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of YouTube channels out there which talk about this kind of thing, but I feel like while I'm an eternal optimist and I'm, all for like, you can do anything you want, I do think there are times in life where sometimes you've got to say, I might just lay off that for a bit and focus more on this. And I think that if some things are meant to be, they will be a lot easier for you. They'll happen a lot easier for you, And I think life shouldn't always be about banging down doors constantly. I feel like you need to flow a bit more and let just things kind of come to you, but not in a sense that you're just being lazy. What I mean is you need to put your best self out there to the world and see what comes to you instead of constantly trying to bang down doors for people who don't want to answer, And I know kind of eternal optimists and kind of self-help gurus and whatnot will say you've got to never kind of give up and you have to like keep doing it this way and do it this way. And there's definitely some truth to it, I'm sure, but I'm the kind of person, I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit lazy, but I just think, if some things work a lot better than others more naturally, then it's like, who's to say you shouldn't do that more? And I'm not talking about doing something like a boring job you don't care about, but for me, I think videography was one of those things where I didn't tie my identity to it massively in the beginning. It wasn't a way for me to kind of get love and recognition. And I think when I do it, and I, provide footage and I do edits for people. And if they critique it, I don't get that, offended, because I'm not like emotionally attached as with music. Whereas my emotional attachments with music has caused me problems in the past where people might criticize it and whatnot. And yeah, it's a very emotional field. People's emotions are very heavily invested in it. And I think that's another reason why music can sometimes cause a problem. You have a lot of people who have a lot invested in it, whereas videography, I think, you kind of do have people invested in it as well, but not to that dangerous emotional level, if that makes sense. And I think that's what's quite appealing to me. Like, I love just seeing kind of footage and, different types of footage and compositions and capturing moments and kind of mingling with people. But, if someone critiques your work, it's like, oh, okay, no worries. This is about you. And I think this is what I like, the direction of my business, because it's not about just serving myself, it's about serving other people. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. But yeah, if you're a multidisciplinary, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear from you. Let me know about your journey. Let me know how you figured things out. Have you maintained your sanity thus far? So I'd love to hear from you, and I'll catch you in the next video. That's enough from me, Alex from Tyler Studio. Peace.